Welcome to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
You shared a really interesting piece with us from Planet Rugby. Loose pass. Flawed World Cup outgrows territories. Reality hits all blacks.
Yeah, it really gets you thinking, doesn't it? Touches on some big themes.
Definitely. So today, we're going to unpack that. We'll look at the Rugby World Cup itself, maybe some future league ideas, and this trend of players moving overseas.
Sounds good. Lots to cover.
Right. And just a reminder, if you enjoy these kinds of deep dives into rugby, do make sure you subscribe to Rugby Obsession.
So kicking off with the World Cup, the article sort of asks, is it really a global event anymore?
Yeah, that's the core question, isn't it? When you look at who can realistically win it, and crucially, who can actually afford to host the thing.
Exactly. And it's not just the smaller nations feeling the pinch. You've got, powerhouses like South Africa, New Zealand.
Giants of the game. Winners of the last 5 tournaments between them.
Right. And even they're finding the costs prohibitive.
Yeah.
You mentioned the SA Rugby president, Mark Alexander.
Yeah, he talked about the financial and infrastructural burden. Pretty stark language.
It is. And his counterpart in New Zealand, Mark Robinson, had said similar things before about hosting an expanded tournament that's just getting too big, perhaps?
For a single country of that size, maybe. Which leads to that idea of joint bids, like among the home nations.
Which sounds logical on paper, sharing the load. But then,
Then the arguments start, like which stadiums get the big games? How do you split the revenue fairly? It gets complicated fast.
Very. And the article also notes, potential new European hosts bubbling up, maybe Italy or Spain.
That could be interesting, add a different flavor.
But post-Australia 2027, looking at the traditional rugby championship nations, who's next? And in the Six Nations, France just did it, so.
Yeah, the pool of realistic hosts seems to be shrinking, doesn't it? And it's not just hosting. The cost of participating is massive, too. France spent €13 just staging it.
And for many teams just getting there, the return on that investment is always, tangible, beyond the prestige.
Good question. World Rugby points to increased reinvestment, that 500 million figure.
Which is a huge amount, no doubt. But the article implies a concern, doesn't it, that maybe the money isn't flowing back enough to the nations really driving the value.
Right. Is the model sustainable if only a few can host and many struggle to participate fully? It's a fundamental challenge.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The article also dives into league structures, specifically this Barnes League concept.
Yes, the idea of slimming down the English Premiership and bringing in Welsh regions.
Cutting the Premiership to 7, adding 3 from Wales. It's
Right.
radical.
It is, but it taps into that sort of nostalgic appeal, right? Seeing Cardiff play Bath again regularly, those old rivalries.
Definitely a romantic notion, and it echoes earlier talks about an Anglo-Welsh league helping Welsh rugby.
But then, bam, reality check, the finances.
Exactly. The article throws out some numbers. Cardiff Blues valued under £1 million, compared to, 20 million invested in London Irish?
And London Irish weren't even, setting the Premiership alight at the time, as the article points out. That disparity is just massive.
It really is. How do you make that work? Integrating teams with such different financial clout.
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? Or maybe the £20 million question. Makes a combined league very, very difficult to structure fairly.
What about just a straightforward Anglo-Welsh competition with the existing teams? The article mentions that too.
Yeah, but then you run into scheduling headaches, don't you? Clubs are already stretched thin, finding space for more cross-border games.
It feels like a constant tension. The desire for these big cross-border clashes versus the practical economic limits.
It really does. And speaking of economic realities, that brings us nicely to player movement.
Yes. Mark Tele'a heading overseas from New Zealand. That's a big one.
Huge. And it feels like a symbol of this wider trend, top players being lured away by big money in Japan and France.
The article suggests that the old motivators, like the honor of the national jersey, the tradition, it's maybe not enough anymore for some.
Or at least it's competing hard against very significant financial offers. The economic pull is getting stronger.
Which obviously has knock-on effects. What does it mean for national team selection if your best players are scattered overseas?
Big challenge there. And what about the domestic leagues? Do they get weakened if all the top talent drains away to just a couple of super rich leagues?
Yeah, it raises that fundamental question the article poses.
Yeah.
What happens to the game when playing for your country isn't necessarily the absolute pinnacle or the main driver anymore?
It's a potential seismic shift, isn't it? Changes the whole landscape.
It really does. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit there, all stemming from that Planet Rugby piece. The World Cup's future, potential league shakeups, player drain.
Some really critical crossroads for rugby laid out quite starkly.
Definitely food for thought. And hey, if you're listening and finding this interesting, remember to subscribe to Rugby Obsession for more discussions like this.
We've looked at the financial pressures on hosting the World Cup, the complexities of maybe an Anglo-Welsh league.
And this growing power of overseas clubs pulling top talent. So what are your thoughts listening to this?
Yeah, we genuinely love to hear them. What's the future for the World Cup in your eyes? Can these cross-border leagues ever really work?
And what can be done about player movement? Or should anything be done? Let us know your opinions. Subscribe to Rugby Obsession. Drop us a comment. Let's keep talking about it.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for listening to this Rugby Obsession Deep Dive.
Thanks, everyone.
We look forward to you listening to our next episode.